Why was everyone watching, but no one moving? She tapped twice, the universal signal, the one drilled into every operator from day one. 2 taps meant stop, 2 taps meant release, 2 taps meant the drill was over. But Staff Sergeant Marcus Kane's forearm stayed locked across her windpipe like a steel bar. His grip didn't loosen, didn't shift, didn't acknowledge the protocol that was supposed to protect them all. 8.6 seconds. That's how long he held the choke after Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Garrett tapped out. 8.6 seconds past regulation, past reason, past the moment her vision collapsed into a narrowing tunnel and her fingers scraped uselessly at his forearm, finding no give, no mercy, no humanity in the pressure cutting off her air supply. The training hall at the Naval Special Warfare Facility in Coronado was silent except for the sound of her struggle. 37 people watched, instructors, recruits, Marines who'd seen combat in 3 different countries. They stood frozen like witnesses to a crime they couldn't stop, wouldn't stop because in this compound protocol answered to something older and more brutal than any manual. It answered to power, raw, physical power, and the willingness to use it without mercy. Kane held the choke until her body went limp in his arms, until she hung there like a puppet with severed strings. Only then did he release her, letting her collapse to the mat with the casual indifference of someone discarding trash. She didn't scream when she came to, didn't threaten, didn't even raise her voice above a whisper when she finally stood, throat already shadowing with the dark bloom of bruises that would mark her skin for weeks. She just looked at him. A flat, measuring stare that contained no anger, no fear, nothing but cold calculation. The look of a sniper acquiring a target through crosshairs, measuring distance, wind speed, the exact trajectory needed to make the shot count. But she didn't forget, and 72 hours later, with every pair of eyes in that compound locked on a demonstration cage and a command master chief bearing silent witness from the observation deck, she wouldn't need to touch him at all. Because when the evidence flashed across those screens, when timestamps and tap counts scrolled past in merciless digital precision, Kane wouldn't just lose the fight. He'd lose everything. His career, his reputation, the shield of protection that had kept him untouchable for years. But what evidence could possibly end a decorated Marine's career in minutes? What could she have captured that would shatter the wall of silence that protected men like him? Before we show you the exact moment his world collapsed, we need to go back, 4 days before that choke, to a briefing room half a continent away, where a woman with a sniper's patience and a dead mentor's unfinished mission made a choice that would ignite everything. The briefing room at Naval Operations Command in Norfolk sat 3 levels underground, concrete walls, fluorescent panels that never quite reached the corners, no windows, no natural light, just the steady hum of climate control and the gravitational weight of classified decisions pressing down from above. Lieutenant Commander Rebecca Garrett sat alone at the long aluminum table, palms flat against the cold metal surface, waiting. She'd been waiting for 6 months. 6 months since the phone call that obliterated her world. 6 months since Master Chief Ethan Cross died in what official documentation classified as a training accident. 6 months of knowing, with the absolute certainty that had kept her alive through 2 combat tours, that it had been no accident at all. Or opened. Admiral James Kincaid entered without ceremony, a folder tucked under one arm, weathered features reflecting 3 decades of impossible command decisions. Neither saluted. This wasn't that kind of meeting. His voice was measured when he finally spoke. "You know why you're here, it wasn't a question." "Coronado," she answered. Her voice came out controlled, measured. Years of operational discipline keeping everything locked down tight. The combat conditioning annex. Kincaid's eyes narrowed fractionally. 3 informal complaints over the last 8 months, all involving the same instructor. Staff Sergeant Marcus Kane, Marine Raider, Bronze Star recipient. 2 Afghanistan deployments. He paused deliberately. Decorated, respected, connected, and dangerous. We don't have definitive proof. That's the problem. He finally opened the folder, slid a photograph across the table. A man in his late 30s, athletic build, regulation fade, features that looked carved from granite with a chisel, the kind of face that could smile without any warmth reaching the eyes. The complaints never formalized, Kincaid continued. No evidence. No witnesses willing to testify. Just whispers and rumors and Marines who suddenly request transfers. Garrett lifted the photograph. Studied it with the same focus she'd once used to calculate windage and bullet drop at 1,200 meters. Master Chief Cross was investigating this program when he died. I know. Kincaid's voice softened a fraction. Ethan was my friend too, Commander. We served together in Desert Storm, but his death was ruled accidental. Equipment failure during a fast rope exercise. No indication of foul play. No foul play they could prove. She set the photo down, met Kincaid's gaze dead on. Sir, with respect, Ethan Cross survived 30 years as a SEAL, 2 wars, dozens of black operations, more combat insertions than most operators see in a lifetime. He doesn't die because a rope breaks. Kincaid was quiet for a long moment. Somewhere in the maze of corridors beyond, footsteps echoed and faded. When he spoke again, his voice carried weight he couldn't articulate officially. The Annex operates in a gray zone, Commander, joint military combat training, multiple service branches, extreme intensity conditioning. It's designed to push personnel past conventional limits. Sometimes that means traditional oversight doesn't quite apply. Someone needs to make it apply. Yes. He pulled another document from the folder. That's why you're here. I'm offering you a rotation assignment. 60 days at Coronado. Compliance and protocol oversight for the integration program. You'll observe, document, ensure all training exercises meet regulatory standards. He slid the paper toward her. It's voluntary. Your record is flawless. You could decline and no one would question it. Garrett didn't touch the document. Who's protecting Kane? That's not, sir. She leaned forward slightly. 3 complaints that never formalized. An investigation that died with the investigator. Someone with enough juice to make problems vanish. So I'll ask directly, who's protecting him? Kincaid's jaw tight. Captain Vincent Mercer, JAG Corps. He was Kane's commanding officer in Afghanistan. Marja Offensive, 2010. They went through hell together. Mercer's a rising star and Kane is his proof of concept for aggressive combat conditioning. He paused. If you take this assignment, you'll be going up against more than one staff sergeant. You'll be challenging an entire command philosophy. Good. Garrett pulled the document toward her, found a pen. Ethan Cross believed in doing things right, honor and discipline, not just results. He died trying to prove both were possible. She signed her name in clean, precise strokes. I'm not letting that mean nothing. Kincaid nodded slowly, something like approval flickering across his features. Cross trained you well, best sniper in your class, top 2% of Bud S candidates. You've earned your trident 10 times over. He stood, collected the folder. But Commander, understand what you're walking into. The Annex isn't run by the chain of command on paper. It's run by whoever commands respect on the mats right now. That's Kane. Then I'll have to change that. She stood as well, came to attention. When do I leave? Tomorrow, 600. Fly into San Diego, report to the base commander for initial briefing, then straight to the Annex. Kincaid moved toward the door, paused with his hand on the handle. One more thing. Mercer will know you're coming. He'll know why. And he'll do everything in his power to protect his Marine. Let him try, sir. Kincaid almost smiled. Cross said you were stubborn, called it your greatest strength and your biggest liability. He opened the door. Let's hope he was right about the first part. After his departure, Garrett remained standing in that windowless room for a long moment. Her hand drifted to her collar, touched the small trident pin there. The symbol of everything Ethan Cross had taught her, everything he died for. She'd made him a promise the day they buried him. Made it silently, standing in the rain at Arlington while a chaplain spoke words that meant nothing and meant everything. She'd promised to finish what he started, to expose the rot he died trying to cut out. Now she had her chance, one chance. 60 days, it would have to be enough. What does it feel like to walk into a room where everyone already hates you? Garrett stepped off the transport at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado at 7:30, the California sun already burning through the marine layer. The Pacific stretched out behind her, endless and indifferent. Ahead, the combat conditioning annex squatted like a concrete fortress, windows too small to see through, walls too thick to hear screams. She carried one duffel bag and a tablet loaded with 6 months of research. Every complaint Ethan had documented, every irregularity he'd flagged, every pattern of behavior that pointed to a systematic problem, not just one bad instructor. The base commander's briefing had been perfunctory: standard safety protocols, emergency procedures, chain of command, all the official language that meant nothing when the doors closed and the mats got bloody. The real briefing came from the look in his eyes when he mentioned Kane's name. "Careful, Commander. That one's got friends in high places." She already knew. What she didn't know yet was how deep the protection ran. How many people would look the other way when the violence crossed the line? How many had already looked away? The annex training hall was vast, 60 meters by 40, combat mats covering most of the floor, pull-up bars and rope climbs along one wall, a demonstration cage in the center where sparring matches could be observed from all angles, and everywhere the smell, sweat and disinfectant and something else. Something metallic and old, fear maybe, or blood that never quite washed out of the mats. 32 personnel were present when she entered, 28 men, 4 women, all turned to look at her with the synchronized precision of a pack recognizing a new animal in their territory. She felt their assessment, saw it in their eyes: female, officer, outsider, someone sent from headquarters to cause problems, someone who didn't belong. Kane stood at the far end of the hall, exactly as his photograph had shown, but somehow more in person, bigger, more solid. The kind of physical presence that dominated a room without effort. He was conducting a demonstration with a recruit, showing a submission hold with clinical efficiency. He didn't acknowledge her arrival, didn't even glance in her direction. The message was clear: you don't matter here. A Master Chief approached her. 50s, scarred knuckles, eyes that had seen things she could only imagine. Name was Monroe, Ethan Cross's friend, the one who tried to help with the investigation before it got shut down. "Commander Garrett, welcome to Coronado." His voice was neutral, professional, but there was something in his expression, a flicker of recognition, of shared grief, of understanding why she was really here. "Master Chief." She extended her hand. He shook it. Held it a moment longer than necessary. "Be careful." That was all he said, but it was enough. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in institutional resistance. She documented everything, observed every training session, noted every violation of protocol: excessive force during grappling drills, chokes held past tap-out, verbal abuse that crossed the line from aggressive motivation into psychological warfare. And everywhere, always, Kane was at the center, not just participating, leading. Setting the standard that everyone else followed, because to do otherwise was to mark yourself as weak. She filed reports. They went nowhere. Requested formal investigations. They were delayed. Cited specific regulation violations. They were explained away as necessary intensity for elite operator conditioning. Captain Mercer visited twice. Each time he made a point of watching Kane's sessions, made a point of complimenting his methods, made a point of ignoring Garrett entirely except for one brief conversation where he mentioned casually that her rotation could be cut short if she wasn't finding the assignment productive. The threat was subtle but unmistakable: back off or get removed. She didn't back off. Instead, she did what Ethan had taught her. She watched. She learned. She waited for the opening. Because men like Kane always made mistakes, always pushed too far, always believed their protection was absolute. She just needed to be patient enough to catch it, and document it in a way that couldn't be ignored or explained away. The opening came during a routine sparring drill. Kane was partnered with a young Marine corporal, fresh out of training, eager to prove himself. The kind of target Kane preferred because they wouldn't know when to quit. The corporal tapped, clearly, twice against Kane's arm during a rear naked choke. Kane held it for 3 extra seconds, not long enough to cause unconsciousness, just long enough to make the point: "I decide when this ends, not you." Garrett noted it, filed it, added it to the growing documentation. But she knew it wasn't enough. Not yet, because everyone would say the corporal was fine. No injury, No permanent damage, just aggressive training. The system that protected Kane was designed to absorb complaints like this, to process them into nothing. She needed something undeniable, something that would force even Mercer to act. She just didn't know it would cost her oxygen and consciousness to get it. How do you turn yourself into bait? Garrett stood in her quarters that night, staring at her reflection in the small mirror above the sink. Her face looked back, tired, determined, carrying 6 months of grief that wouldn't process, wouldn't fade because the work wasn't done yet. Ethan's voice echoed in her memory. Sometimes you can't wait for the system to work, Beck. Sometimes you have to make it work. She'd made a decision, a calculated risk that would either expose Kane definitively or end her career. Maybe both. She was going to volunteer as his sparring partner, put herself directly in the situation she'd been documenting, give him the opportunity to cross the line with a superior officer while cameras recorded every second. It was dangerous, stupid maybe, but she'd run the calculations. Kane operated on pattern. He targeted people he thought he could dominate, people who wouldn't fight back effectively. A female officer who'd spent 3 weeks writing reports and avoiding the mats would look like perfect prey. And she had one advantage Kane didn't know about. Years ago, when Ethan had been training her for close quarters combat, he taught her how to take a choke, how to tap properly, how to protect her airway even under pressure, how to stay conscious longer than her body wanted to, how to remember everything even when her vision tunneled. She'd need all of it. The next morning, she entered the training hall at 600. Monroe was there early, running maintenance on equipment. He looked up when she approached. "I need to be on today's sparring rotation." With Kane, Monroe's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. "Commander, I don't think that's. I wasn't asking for approval, Master Chief. I'm informing you of my intent to participate in regulation training exercises." His jaw tightened. "He knows you're here to investigate him. He'll use this, I'm counting on it." She met his gaze steadily. "Just make sure the cameras are recording, all of them, every angle." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Ethan trained you for this." "Yes, he did. Make sure the session recorder is backed up to the cloud. Real-time upload, not just local storage." Monroe's eyes widened slightly, understanding settling in. "You're not just documenting, you're creating evidence that can't be erased. Evidence that can't be made to disappear like Ethan's investigation." "Exactly." The session began at 800. 16 personnel present. Kane ran the warm-up with his usual intensity, burpees until muscles screamed, pull-ups until grip failed, then onto the mats for technique work. Garrett participated without complaint, matched the pace, showed competence but not expertise, made herself look capable enough to be worth dominating but not dangerous enough to worry about. When Kane announced sparring partners, she stepped forward. "I'll take a round." The hall went quiet. She felt 32 pairs of eyes lock onto her, felt the tension ratchet up as everyone processed what was happening. The investigating officer volunteering to fight the subject of her investigation. Kane smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Commander, I don't think that's appropriate. You're here to observe, not participate. I've observed enough. Time to understand the training from the inside." She moved toward the demonstration cage. "Unless you have a problem sparring with a superior officer." Trap was set. If he refused, he looked weak in front of his trainees. If he accepted, he had to either hold back and look soft or go full intensity and risk exactly what she was hopping for. He accepted. Of course he did. Men like Kane couldn't resist the opportunity to prove dominance. They circled each other in the cage. Kane moved with the fluid confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Garrett kept her stance defensive, watchful, waiting for him to commit. He came in fast. Grabbed for a collar tie. She defended, but not perfectly. Let him establish some control. They grappled, shifted. His strength advantage was significant, but she'd expected that. Used technique to compensate. Made him work for every position. Showed enough resistance to make it a real fight, but not enough to embarrass him. 5 minutes in, he shot for a takedown, got her to the mat, transitioned to back control with practiced efficiency. She felt his arm snake around her neck, felt the pressure begin to build as he locked in the rear naked choke. This was the moment. Either he'd follow protocol and release when she tapped, or he'd reveal exactly what Ethan had died investigating. The pressure increased, cutting off blood flow to her brain. She had maybe 8 seconds before unconsciousness, maybe 12 if she managed it perfectly. She tapped twice, clear, distinct strikes against his forearm, the universal signal, the one that meant stop. His arm didn't loosen, the pressure didn't decrease. Instead, it intensified. She tapped again, harder, more desperate, still nothing. Her vision began to tunnel, the edges of the world darkening as oxygen deprivation kicked in. She could hear people shouting, Monroe's voice cutting through. Release, tap out, acknowledged, but Kane's arm stayed locked. 8.6 seconds. Later, when they reviewed the footage, that's what the timestamp would show. 8.6 seconds past her tap before he finally released. 8.6 seconds of documented, undeniable protocol violation. She collapsed when he let go, didn't have to fake it. Her body was genuinely oxygen-starved, genuinely struggling to process what had just happened. She heard boots on the mat, felt hands checking her vitals, Monroe's voice close to her ear. Commander, stay with me. The cameras got everything. She managed the smallest nod. Then let the medics take over. Let them document the bruising already forming on her throat. Let them photograph the evidence. Let them create the medical record that would corroborate what the video already proved. Kane had crossed the line. And this time, there were too many witnesses, too much documentation, too much recorded evidence to make it disappear. But what she didn't know yet, lying there on that mat with her throat on fire and her vision still spotted, was that this was just the beginning. Because exposure wasn't the same as justice. And the system that had protected Kane for years wasn't going to surrender him easily. Why were they all staring at her like she'd done something wrong? The medical bay was cold, sterile, the kind of place where pain gets measured and documented and treated with clinical detachment. Garrett sat on the examination table, a Navy corpsman shining a light into her eyes, checking pupil dilation, asking questions designed to assess cognitive function. Name, date, location. She answered each one correctly, but her throat felt like someone had taken a blowtorch to the inside. Each word scraped, each breath burned. The bruising was already spectacular. Deep purple shadows spreading across her neck in the exact shape of Kane's forearm. The corpsman photographed it from multiple angles, documented the petechiae, the small burst blood vessels in her eyes, added it all to her medical record with the kind of thoroughness that suggested he'd done this before. How many others? She asked. Her voice came out as a rasp. He didn't look up from his tablet. Ma'am. How many others has Kane put in this bay? The corpsman's hands paused, just for a second, then resumed typing. I can't discuss other patients, Commander, but she already had her answer. The pause told her everything. Monroe appeared in the doorway, waited until the corpsman finished his assessment and left before entering fully. The footage is uploaded, secured, multiple backup locations. He pulled up a chair, sat heavily. Command is convening an investigation board. 48 hours. About damn time. She touched her throat gingerly. And Kane, relieved of duty pending investigation, confined to quarters. Mercer is already calling in favors, trying to control the narrative. Let him try. She met Monroe's eyes. This time the evidence speaks for itself. But even as she said it, doubt crept in, because she'd seen how the system worked, how investigations got quietly shelved, how witnesses changed their stories, how inconvenient truths became administrative complications that vanished into classified files. Monroe seemed to read her thoughts. Ethan didn't trust the system either. That's why he documented everything, built redundancy into every step. He pulled a small USB drive from his pocket. He gave this to me before he died. Told me to keep it safe, to give it to someone who'd use it if anything happened to him. Garrett took the drive. It was warm from his pocket. What's on it? Everything. Every complaint he investigated, every interview he conducted, evidence of pattern behavior going back 3 years, and something else. He paused. Proof that Kane's previous complaints didn't just disappear. They were actively suppressed. Emails between Mercer and senior JAG officers. Conversations about protecting the program's reputation. about not letting a few incidents derail important combat conditioning research. Her hand closed around the drive. This is it. This is what got him killed. Probably. Monroe's voice was heavy, but we can't prove the connection. His death was too clean, too perfectly accidental. Convenient timing, though. He died 2 days before he was supposed to brief a Senate Oversight Committee on training safety violations. Garrett felt cold spreading through her chest. They killed him to protect Kane, to protect the program. Kane's just a symptom. The disease is bigger. It's an entire command philosophy that prioritizes results over safety. That treats regulations as suggestions. That believes the only way to forge elite warriors is to break people and see who survives. Ethan died trying to prove there was a better way. She looked at the drive. Now she had the ammunition to finish his fight. But ammunition meant nothing without the right moment to use it, without leverage that couldn't be ignored or buried. The investigation board convened 2 days later. Conference room, long table, 7 officers, 3 Navy, 2 Marine Corps, 2 JAG lawyers. Garrett testified first, walked them through her assignment, her observation, the escalating pattern of protocol violations she documented. Then came the sparring session. The video footage was played on a wall-mounted screen, every angle, real time. The moment she tapped was crystal clear. 2 distinct strikes against Kane's forearm. Unmistakable. Impossible to miss. Then the 8.6 seconds of continued pressure, her body going limp, the delayed release, the medical aftermath. The room was silent when the video ended. One of the JAG officers spoke first. "Commander, you volunteered for this sparring session. You put yourself in this situation deliberately." "Yes, sir." "Why?" "Because 19 other people had filed complaints about identical behavior, and every single one of those complaints disappeared into the system without consequence. I needed evidence that couldn't be ignored." The Marine colonel leaned forward. "You're saying you intentionally provoked a protocol violation. I'm saying I created an opportunity for Staff Sergeant Kane to either follow regulations or reveal his pattern of excessive force. He made his choice. For 8.6 seconds while I was unconscious and unable to defend myself, he made his choice." Another JAG officer shuffled papers. "Staff Sergeant Kane claims you failed to tap clearly, that he released as soon as he recognized your signal." "The video contradicts that claim, sir. The timestamp doesn't lie, but Garrett could see it in their faces, the calculation, the weighing of institutional reputation against individual justice. Kane had powerful allies, had years of decorated service, had the narrative that aggressive training produced superior operators. She was an outsider, an investigator, someone making waves. The board deliberated for 3 hours. She waited in the corridor, throat still aching, watching personnel walk past with carefully neutral expressions. Monroe brought her coffee, didn't speak, just sat with her in solidarity. When they finally called her back in, the senior JAG officer delivered the finding. "After review of all evidence, this board finds that Staff Sergeant Marcus Kane did commit a protocol violation during the sparring exercise in question. However, we also find that Commander Garrett's decision to volunteer as a sparring partner while conducting an active investigation represents questionable judgment that contributed to the situation. Kane will receive a formal reprimand and mandatory retraining on tap-out protocols. Commander Garrett will complete her rotation assignment, but her final report will note the investigation methodology concerns." That's it. The words came out before she could stop them. A formal reprimand. For 8 seconds of sustained choking after a clear tap-out. The officer's expression hardened. "Commander, you will address this board with proper military courtesy." She came to attention. "With respect, sir, this board just validated exactly what Staff Sergeant Kane has been doing for years. You've told every operator in this program that protocol violations result in paperwork, not consequences." "That's not our finding, that's your interpretation." The Marine colonel stood. "This board is adjourned." Garrett left the conference room feeling the weight of failure pressing down like a physical force. 6 months, all of Ethan's work, all the documentation, all the risk, and the system had protected Kane anyway, softened the violation into an administrative slap on the wrist, turned her evidence into questionable methodology. Monroe caught up with her in the corridor. "They're not done." "What?" She stopped. Turned to face him. "There's a separate investigation. Inspector General. They've been building a case based on Ethan's documentation. The board couldn't acknowledge it because it's classified, but my contact says they're moving forward. The drive I gave you, they already have copies." Her heart rate picked up. When? Soon. Maybe days. They were waiting for one more piece, something recent, something undeniable, something that would connect the historical pattern to current practice. He paused. "You just gave it to them. The choking incident, it's perfect. Recent, documented, involving a field-grade officer who was conducting official oversight. It's the bridge between Ethan's investigation and present-day accountability." She felt hope flicker. Small, fragile, but real. So the board's finding, political cover. They had to rule the way they did to maintain the chain of command. But the IG investigation isn't bound by the same political constraints. Exactly. Monroe smiled grimly. Sometimes justice works on two tracks, the official one that protects institutions, and the real one that protects people. Ethan taught me that. She took a breath. Let it out slowly. How long until the IG moves? I don't know. But when they do, it won't be a reprimand. It'll be courts-martial, plural, because Kane's not the only instructor involved, and Mercer's not the only officer who's been running interference. What do you do when victory looks like destruction? 3 days later, the compound erupted, not with violence, with presence. Inspector General investigators arrived at 600, 12 of them with federal warrants and authority that superseded every chain of command in the building. They locked down the facility, sequestered personnel, seized records, and began interviews that lasted 18 hours. Garrett watched it happen from her quarters, saw Kane escorted out in handcuffs, saw Mercer's face go white when they served him with official notification of criminal investigation, saw 3 other instructors removed from duty. The program she'd been sent to observe was being systematically dismantled. Monroe brought her updates throughout the day. "They're using everything. Ethan's documentation, your medical records, the video footage, testimony from 17 operators who were too afraid to speak up before but are talking now. It's comprehensive. It's devastating. And it's exactly what Ethan died trying to make happen." She should have felt victorious, should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt empty, hollow, because Ethan should have been here to see this, should have been the one testifying, should have been the one ensuring the new program got built the right way. The next morning, she was called to a different briefing room, smaller, more private. Admiral Kincaid was there. So was a 3-star general she didn't recognize, and a woman in civilian clothes who introduced herself as Deputy Inspector General. "Commander Garrett." The Deputy IG opened a folder. "Your investigation and subsequent testimony have resulted in the most significant combat training reform in 2 decades. Formal charges are being filed against 6 instructors and 4 senior officers. The Annex program is being completely restructured." She paused. "We're offering you a choice. You can return to your previous assignment, or you can stay at Coronado to help rebuild the program, implement the reforms, train the next generation of instructors in proper protocol." Garrett looked at Kincaid. He nodded slightly. "Ethan would want you to finish it, not just expose the corruption but fix what was broken, build something better." She thought about the corporal who'd been choked, about the 19 complaints that had vanished, about every operator who'd been taught that survival meant accepting abuse, about Ethan who'd believed the system could work if good people had the courage to make it work. "I'll stay, but on one condition." The Deputy IG raised an eyebrow. "I want full authority to implement changes. No interference from command. No political pressure to soften regulations. If we're going to do this, we do it right." The general spoke for the first time. "Agreed. You'll have oversight authority and direct reporting to my office. Anyone interferes, you call me personally." She came to attention. "Then I accept." The next 6 months were harder than combat, harder than harder than anything she'd done in her career. She dismantled the old program piece by piece, fired instructors who couldn't adapt to the new protocols, implemented mandatory recording systems, created anonymous reporting channels, established zero-tolerance policies that were actually enforced. She brought in Monroe as her second-in-command. Together, they rewrote the curriculum. High-intensity training that didn't sacrifice safety. Aggressive conditioning that maintained respect for regulations, proving that honor and effectiveness weren't mutually exclusive. The resistance was brutal. Officers who called her soft, Marines who said she was ruining combat readiness, politicians who warned that she was creating weak operators. She ignored them all, pushed forward, because she'd made Ethan a promise. The first new class graduated 4 months after the restructure began. 23 operators, men and women from multiple service branches, trained harder than the previous program, but trained safer, trained right. The ceremony was small, no speeches, just a simple graduation where each operator received their certification and a copy of the new training manual. On the dedication page, a quote, "Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Master Chief Ethan Cross, USN." After the ceremony, Garrett found a package waiting in her office. No return address, just her name in careful handwriting. Inside was Ethan's personal training journal, 3 decades of wisdom distilled into handwritten observations. A note was tucked inside the front cover, his handwriting unmistakable. "Beck, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you've done what needed doing. I always knew you had the strength for it. Remember that discipline isn't about following rules blindly. It's about having the courage to enforce them when everyone else looks away. Make them better. Make them remember why we do this. Be that instructor, be that leader. Make me proud." She sat at her desk, the journal in her lap, and let herself cry for the first time since that phone call 6 months ago. Cried for the mentor she'd lost, for the broken system she'd exposed, for the cost of doing what was right when the world wanted you to look away. Then she dried her eyes, opened the journal, and began to read. Ethan's techniques, his philosophy, his belief that one person with courage could change a system. He'd proved it with his life. Now she would prove it with hers. 6 months later, Garrett stood in front of a new class. 40 operators, fresh, eager, nervous. Behind her, a memorial plaque on the wall. Master Chief Ethan Cross, USN, 1965-2024. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. She looked at their faces, saw potential, saw determination, saw the future. You're here because you represent the next evolution of combat training. High-intensity preparation that doesn't sacrifice safety for results. We're going to prove that honor and effectiveness aren't mutually exclusive. Master Chief Cross spent 30 years fighting for this program, died trying to make it right. We're going to honor his legacy by training warriors who are as disciplined as they are dangerous, who understand that tap-out protocol isn't weakness. It's the foundation of trust that makes aggressive training possible. The training began, and on that memorial plaque, Ethan's words caught the morning light. A promise and a challenge to everyone who entered that hall. They crossed that bridge together, the right way, Ethan's way. The way of warriors who understood that true strength wasn't about how hard you could hit. It was about knowing when to hold back and when to let go. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts, and in acting it changes everything.